Welcome to the Microsoft Security Insights Podcast with your hosts, Franklin Grimberg and Edward Walton, where we discuss Microsoft 365 security and Azure security news and products. Recorded June 15th, 2022. Good evening, Franklin. Good evening, Rod. Good evening, Brody. Good evening, Alistair. Did I say it right?
It's cool, Mel.
Okay, Al. Of course I did. And good evening, Matthew. I'm terrible at names, man. So, Brody, tell me what's good, brother.
Oh, life's good. In 72 hours, I'm taking 2 weeks off. So I'm just getting everything capped off and, documents sorted and, shaking hands like, okay, customers, hope you're doing well. See you later. I'm just looking forward to time off, honestly. Yeah.
Edward, I do hear a echo off of your computer.
Oh, Edward, you can't pronounce basic names.
Hey, I don't need you coming over here, Franklin, trying to figure out your computer. Leave me alone.
You got me. I didn't know you two were together. That's awesome.
So he's in therapy. Which one's the therapist?
Me.
Okay.
Yeah, I can see that. Well, they could be 360 therapists,
So you met for lunch. Frank fixed that. What else? No food.
No. Frank did not meet me for lunch. He's promising me dinner, so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
And no, I'm up here.
Chick-fil-A is a cheap date, so I'll take it.
I'm not eating Chick-fil-A. I'm not doing that.
Five guys. I take him to Five Guys.
Five Guys is good, especially when you get 2 double cheeseburgers and you mash them together. You got to lean on it, Al, to make sure it stays. Then I hold it together by sticking French fries through it.
That's how you hold it together.
Wow.
Yeah.
The United States.
Brody, where you going
right
on
there.
your? Where you going on this exodus? This thing that you're leaving, this sabbatical.
I am going to stay with my in-laws in British Columbia, and activities include getting the boat ready for summer, drywall, golf 4 courses in 4 days, and a lot of biking and tiring out my dog every day with long walks.
That sounds like a plan. I had a good time, man. When we were in Greece, I did the same thing. I was very versatile in my activities. I drank beer, and then I drank beer, and then I drank some more beer, and then I ate some French fries. Then I drank more beer, and had a good time.
That's great. They don't call them freedom fries on Crete?
They don't call them what again?
Freedom fries?
Freedom fries.
Never heard that joke?
I call them fresh fries. They were the best French fries I had in my life. They were better than even. The only reason Belgium is close is because of generally when you get Fritz there, they come with mussels and delirium beer. But man,
wow,
they were good French fries. But all right, man, I'm happy you taking some time off. You work hard, you deserve it.
Yeah. But I'm going to come on. I'm going to come on the episodes over the next 2 weeks because I'm mostly not working with customers the next 2 weeks. I'm not necessarily on vacation. So I'll be chiming in for key calls over the next few weeks. And this podcast, of course, is one of the top priorities in my life. So I will be here.
That's sad.
We go again.
At 5 p.m. Eastern.
That's real sad.
And on that note,
mention of what's in the background there, Brady. I mean, that's what is that? Is that a
Wheels of Steel?
What is it?
It's a Newmark NS7 2 digital vinyl mixing board, 4-channel, with my 2013 MacBook Pro and 2 6-inch KRK Rocket 6-inch monitors and a map of Mars and a map of Mars.
Okay.
Yeah. And
now he scratches. He's like,
is he any good though? I want to know if he's any good.
I'm more of a blender. I blend. I don't scratch. I blend.
Okay,
and actually, my friend has it. My very good friend of mine is getting married this August, and it will be the first time anyone's asked me to DJ for a period of time in years. So I have been going. Yeah, so I've been going through all the music I want to play, and then I've been slowly narrowing it down, and now I've actually started the mixing and building the set because I want to have it all done and practice. So when I get there, I can just do it and then have a great time. And
so no one's going to come up to you and say, "Can you play?" And then you've got to drop some beats.
No, I don't do that. No, I play the list. Okay. Yeah. Although I've played like a New Year's Eve gig before where it's like, can you play my favorite song? And it's like, I guess I'll download that right now. I didn't have it, I can do that. Yeah. So I've seen it both ways. Yeah.
Well, cool. Okay. Rod, what about you, man? I ain't talked to you in a month of Sundays. How are you doing?
I'm good. I don't even have to think about it. I'm doing excellent. Just got back from RSA last week. Hopefully you all saw me. I couldn't get the audio to work. I was on my phone, but Chi and I were going out to lunch. RSA was interesting. Frank and I was talking about that before we started recording a little bit. I don't think it was as well attended as people had hoped. Getting in and registering on Monday morning was a breeze, in and out. Had my pass and spent Monday in our offsite Microsoft Security Hub delivering customer demos for Sentinel. Spent all day Tuesday in the expo at the booth delivering Sentinel demos and trying my best to get this. I don't know if you can see that. So CrowdStrike was right next to our booth, Microsoft booth at RSA, right? It was pretty awesome. I have to commend CrowdStrike for what they did. They had a couple different action figures, but you had to go through a demo, watch one of their demos to get it. I thought, I'll go over, I'll get a demo, I'll get one of these action figures. It's almost like they grabbed each other's hands and arms and created this chain link around their booth, wouldn't let Microsoft folks in for whatever reason. I don't know. They told me at one point, we'll give you a demo and you can get an action figure if you go to our career site and apply. And I'm like, okay, that's great.
See, Rod, you got to know how to work this. What you do is you get 2 badges. Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody gives away the free code, right? So then you register as just Rod, and the Rodcast professional, and go in around, collect everything, and go from there. That's the way to do it.
I'm proud of where I work. I don't mind having that on my. I had it up. Well, thing is, I had it on my badge. I also had it on my shirt because I was working the booth, right? Yeah, so I couldn't. What ended up happening is I had a couple people that came by. I said, I'll give you a demo of Microsoft Sentinel if you go over and do a demo of CrowdStrike and get me a action figure. So they brought the action figure back. And I thought, you guys are awesome. So
is it transform? Does it shoot lasers?
Okay, so I'm a little disappointed. They look good from far off, but I took it out of the box. I put it back in the box in case it's ever worth anything, which it absolutely will not be.
Can't believe you took it out of the box.
Took it out of the box. The arms don't even move, man. It's just like a plastic statue.
The best was the Microsoft security blanket. They have to bring that back.
Yeah,
especially when you're flying back. You've got that on.
It's still the thing. We were talking about that. I'm up here and resting with some of my team, and we got a bunch of partners. So we got Open Systems that's presenting now. We had Blue Voyant. They're pretty decent. And we had Ascent, which they are probably the best advisory of all of them. They knew how to talk security program and how the technology maps. But that same sentiment came up that it wasn't well attended, and Kristen on my team saw that. I think she saw the soft attributed to that Gartner split the attention, right? Because Microsoft had a presence up in Gartner. Is it the first year they ever had it on the same weekend?
Oh, they did it the same weekend this year.
I think it was doing the same week.
This is June. Yeah, so this is June. Gartner's normally this week, so it was RSA's fault.
It was RSA. They did it at the same time. Mm-hmm.
So I had a couple Lyft drivers, well, a few more than a couple, and they gave me other reasons why it might be diminished attendance, but that's just more people that live there, I guess.
I have to say
this. Too damn expensive.
Hey, product team, stop making minor changes to the portals. It's driving me crazy because I start questioning whether or not I'm crazy or not.
So we made a big change, and we made a big change though, and then we made a minor change.
You go to Defender for Cloud, right?
Yeah.
They no longer call that secure score. It's now called security posture. I'm like, wow, when did they change this?
I didn't know about that one, actually. That's new. I thought you were talking about just the amazing integration of Defender for Cloud apps in the M365 Defender portal, which I am just super excited about. But I didn't know they changed secure score to security posture.
So you know why we changed that, right? It's all mental. It's all mental because you can never, ever, ever achieve 100% score. Yeah. It's a continual thing, right? So as a posture, you're trying to improve your posture instead of your.
But they always talk about cloud workload protection versus cloud security posture management. So I think they needed to say something like that to go along with that. But yeah, that one I'm sitting there looking at the screen for 30 minutes saying, now did they change that? So yeah.
I think the biggest thing, if you're going to do that, don't go, you're 57 out of 100. Just give a number. Because I think they used to have it.
No maximum.
At the very beginning, they used to have the 100 right there.
I'm waiting for and winner.
I'm seriously waiting for cyber insurance to say, so when this breach occurred, what was your secure score at the time?
Oh, wow. Ooh.
Oh, I can see that coming.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
That's pretty good. I like that.
I think that's already has happened a couple of times when if you do metrics reporting and you give it out, now you're accountable for it.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I would say the only thing that would be a pushback would be you're assuming that a customer is consuming 100% Microsoft products. I would say that score is not always representative of the other compensating controls that may be there.
And that's why they give you the option.
Not easy. Yeah.
They give you the option to select something else. Hey, no, I've got an RSA token for MFA. I'm not using Azure MFA, so we can score this as, accepted, right? Yeah. So that's a good point, Edward. We only have visibility on our ecosystem.
And plus, if there's no technology reporting, I mean, it's gamesmanship. Yep, I did it. Yep, I did it. Yep, I did it. I did it. They get a score. Yep, I did it. Now, if there's some actual back-end integration reporting to say, no, you didn't deploy this because I'm, like that. But like Bear Bryant said at the University of Alabama, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. you ain't trying hard enough, right? Other than that, I've been up here playing my first real business trip, I think. Yeah, I ate some bar food that didn't go well. Luckily, I've had restraint. Everybody's been getting soused because the partner's been picking up the tab. I'm like, beer and a half is good enough for me. Yeah, it's too hot to be walking outside.
What do you do with the other half of beer?
I don't know. Still on the table. Someone got it.
Yeah. Okay.
It wasn't very good beer either.
Okay. Well, you usually finish your beers. I was skeptical.
Oh yeah. I'm fiending now because I really drink it on the podcast. I don't have anything, so I can't bring a red cup and beer here, right?
And no back. Did you bring your back scratcher with you to rest in for the show?
Nah, I was afraid I'd leave it in the hotel room. So I wanted to make sure I keep my scratcher at home. Never know what I do. I just rubbed up against a tree outside the hotel room and I felt better. So there you go. But hey,
they have an area for that.
It was sort of slow weekend. I'm back in the thick of things. I got 3 big major clients that are getting ready to hit the ground running on some Sentinel deployment stuff. I'm actually doing more in CI/CD stuff and then Git repository scanning. And so I got to do a demo with Sentinel and GCP next week. And I don't think they need to see Defender for Cloud Connector, but I'll get the details. I can't mention a customer name on the pod, but they are large. And it's a unique situation because another customer that consumes Sentinel that's even larger is going to be the company that's going to deliver it for them. So we got a partner that's a huge Sentinel consumer that's actually going to be the partner that's going to be the development because they want to build out the exact same way that this partner customer did it. And I'm going to be on it. I'll be the dumb man in the room, but it's going to be a learning lesson because this customer wants to do chargebacks. So they have so many departments. Each department is going to have to pay up, and they're going to actually upcharge on the ingestion to their own company. So they're going to dissuade just random and all up log ingestion by saying this is what you want to pay for.
Well, profitability out of a cost center is exactly where you want to be with pullback, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Well said.
So I can't really give you guys a huge amount of introduction. I know of you. I didn't have time to do my research properly, Al and Matthew, so I'll let Franklin do the introductions this time. I generally make up some BS like you won a Nobel Prize in physics and something like that. You know, you were the first man to step, you know, at the bottom of the dredge trench. So go ahead, Franklin,
trench?
and give them an intro.
What
you know
trench
the
was
trench.
No.
The trench. Yeah.
So when I have a question about compliance or what they call purview today, the first person I call is not Brody, but Alistair. So who's our guest tonight, who's a compliance or purview expert. And the interesting thing is, you know, when I'm coming from the security side, I'm looking at incidents taking place. You know, Alistair can actually show you how to use compliance to investigate security incidents, more than just DLP, which I think is awesome. His sidekick, Matt, is here. I got a sidekick. So the first time I met Matt, it was not a nice situation. Do you remember that, Matt?
I wouldn't say it was not nice. It was pleasant, I would say.
So the first time I met him, he did an awesome Azure security presentation at this user group. I'm like, this is really a great presentation. I'm talking to him afterwards, and you know what he says to me? He goes, hey, do you listen to the Azure security podcast? I'm like, no, I listen to the Microsoft Security Insights podcast. I'm like, I can't believe he asked me that question. So this was a long time ago when I mentioned that there was a really good Azure security guy that was, I saw a presentation and he asked me about a different podcast. This is the person. So yeah, he does
so
great.
People can listen to multiple podcasts, you know.
Exactly.
There can be security podcasts.
Exactly.
So, you know, there's nothing wrong with listening to more than one. Obviously, I listen to this one and I listen to others too.
Yeah.
So I hope to have Matt back on to do more Azure security related talk. And so let Alistair do a full presentation or full introduction of himself. And hopefully we have some people that have questions about compliance. I know that Brody probably has 100 questions about compliance and how you can use compliance in security incident response. So Alistair, do yourself, do your introduction there, full introduction.
My introduction. Well, it's not my podcast, so I can't take it over, right? My name is Alistair Pugin.
But you will.
I live in. Hey, what? I won't take it over, Matt. That's only when you and I are separately on calls. My name's Alistair Pugin. I get people excited about tech, and for my sins, I spend a lot of time in compliance because I come from an enterprise content management background, and that's really where the compliance side comes in, right? I've spent enough time on calls with Frank. You know, Frank is the adult in the room. It's generally myself, Frank, and a guy by the name of Andre Kirtland, who we call the Oracle, because he knows everything about Microsoft. He was probably there with Keith Richards' 3 cockroaches at the beginning of time when they actually created cloud computing. And we spend a lot of time doing the SC stuff, 900. I wasn't on the 300 and the 200 stuff. I did the 400, and we were very opinionated about the use of the word purview. And the last time we spent time together on an exam, we actually told Microsoft that we're not going to include purview and we won't include Priva. And then the marketing team didn't like that, so they rebranded the portal. And that's why we believe today you have purview for everything, right? It's because we said to Microsoft we won't include Azure purview at the time in SC400.
I think it was just Priva at the time, wasn't it?
No, they wanted both. They wanted Azure Purview around the schematized data assets and those things, and they wanted Priva in SC400. We went back to Microsoft and said, create a separate exam and call it SC450 and include insider risk management, information barriers, customer lockbox, and the other stuff.
Don't get Edward started. Don't get Edward started about renumbering every single one of the exams and all that. He has an entire. You'll get him going for 20 minutes. He wants the SC 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 for like every single thing.
Yeah, show everybody with slow progression up instead of having these huge numbers that absolutely are arbitrary to me. I took the SC 100. I'm like, okay, why didn't you give me the SC 99 to get ready? Why did I go to 100 or 2?
Well, at least it's not 4-digit numbers now, hey? It's not like 50 dash or 30 dash 337, right? It's
That's
not
true.
simple numbers. It's a 300 and a 301, or it's an MS 100 and a 101. It's less confusing than it used to be in the past. Oh no, I've got 667 and 668. That was still okay.
7901 or 79.
There we go.
10,
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah.
75, 32, 533, and 34 from back in the day, right? Yeah, take those.
So who is this? Who is this Matt that's with you?
Uh-oh.
Do I have to introduce Matt? Or Matt, are you going to introduce yourself?
Let's see. You give it a stab. Give it a go.
Can I give it a go?
Let's see.
So this is Matthew Levy. He's been around for quite some time. He spends a lot of time in the EMS space, and we call him Mr. Defender at the office, almost like Guardians of the Galaxy. We've even we wanted to tattoo specific glasses on his face, right? With the sort of Milky Way in his glasses, because he did a session as Guardians of the Galaxy. We did that, and you didn't like that because it said Fender. It said Fender on either lens, and you did not like that, and we had to pull it back, right? Because it said badass first, right? So he's the Defender. He's the actual Defender, Mr. Defender.
Wow. Okay, that's a bad.
You're the
stab
security
at
to
it.
my compliance, Matt. I mean, we happen to work for the same company, and
right. That's true.
when
And we
walk in
both
the
live in
room-
the same city.
We do.
town,
We do.
But
I used to live close to you, and we've only managed to visit each other
Cool now.
once.
Yeah.
And then I moved away closer to the office, and now Matt never shows up at the office. He just stays where he is and dips his toes in the water at 5 a.m. in the morning, and he takes his dogs for a walk.
That's
Matt,
right.
Tell us,
And last thing, he's an Olympian gymnast. All right. Nobody says anything about that. And if he does CrossFit, it's too easy because he pulls himself with one hand up on a rope. So yeah.
Sweet.
I'm done.
Not anymore. There's too many gray hairs now. But that's a past life. Frank, you wanted to ask me a question.
I think we're going to need proof of that. Can you pull yourself up real quick?
Yeah. Can you?
Nothing to pull myself up on.
So give us, before we get into compliance, give us 2 security tips that people would not think about. Yeah. I mean, don't say like
think about.
You know, not MFA. You know, give us 2 security tips that you think are important to for people to implement today.
Okay, so from an Azure perspective, people are deploying resources into Azure, and you've mentioned the Defender for Cloud. You can enable that on resources. That's one tip that you should do, even if it's the free tier, just so that you can have some visibility. The second thing is you're most likely deploying some kind of storage. And if you've got a hybrid infrastructure, you probably want to enable private endpoints and connect privately to those endpoints rather than going over the public internet, from a security perspective and from a performance and latency perspective. Express route.
All right.
That's it.
All right. So we'll move on to compliance now. I don't know what you want to talk about, Alistair, so you can take it over here so we can start.
So no top tips or top 9.
Whatever you want. Top tips.
Start with tips. Start with tips. Sure. What are your top 2, Alistair?
My top 2: run through compliance manager. Start there, right? There's freemium templates, and start there. And we normally talk to customers, and we've seen quite an increase in. Well, and it's a weird place to be, right? We've got a lot of organizations like Andre Kirkland's company that he works for, and everyone talks security, and you walk in the door with security. You know, security by design, zero trust this and all of that. But your governance, risk, and compliance people, and we actually had a conversation last night at the UG, right at the end, and we started talking about what sort of role. I mean, governance, risk, and compliance sits with business. It's not a technical thing, right? It's typically not, unless you go speak to the power company in Arizona and they lead with NIST. So there's definitely some form of compliance coming in, right? And the IT people need to understand regulations or legislation that they need to comply to, and then it's an IT task. But compliance, well, GRC generally starts with business. There's a business person that has written a governance document of some sorts. It says you need to retain these sorts of documents, and these documents are deemed highly confidential, and IT has to sort of interpret and translate that. Whereas what you're seeing now, you're seeing IT people, SE 400, it's an actual IT certification. It's got nothing to do with business, right? And we want more certs in the compliance space. But if you want to improve your security posture, start with Compliance Manager. If you look at the assessment templates, I think there's a couple of free ones. And there's a data protection baseline. Is it the data protection baseline?
Yeah. My question is, I love it. It's one of the best unused things out there. People don't use it. I would say it was a free thing, but now you have to pay for the premium assessments, premium templates. How long will the classic keep manifesting there? Why is that still around? Do you know? It doesn't really do anything, right? So if you're in Compliance Manager, you have Compliance Manager, and then you have Compliance Manager Classic. Is it still showing up in yours?
No, it's not there. They ripped that. And you're talking about the Service Trust portal, right? That you used to go when Compliance Manager V1 was launched, and it was at servicetrust.microsoft.com.
Oh, okay.
I think you can still get there from servicetrust.microsoft.com. It'll take you to Compliance Manager. It will actually take you to compliance.microsoft.com to the Compliance Manager blade in the portal.
Yeah, okay. But that's why I keep seeing it.
Is the compliance portal the same as Compliance Manager? And we keep saying compliance, and we're not going to all try to say purview the entire time. So what is the Compliance Admin Center versus the compliance?
Yeah.
So I'm confused.
What they've done, and this is after Frank and I spoke to Microsoft, and then they did the big rebranding thing, because we are officially, it's now on air, and we're taking ownership of this, right? And didn't come up with a new cert. They said, well, we'll just call everything purview. It's like they did with information protection from the old days. That Microsoft actually had a blog post that defined the differences, or not the differences, but it used to be called AD RMS, and then they called it IRM, and then they called it just RMS, and then they called it AIP, and then they called it MIP, and then they deprecated AIP, and people didn't know where to go, right? And now the only part of AIP that's still left is the on-prem scanner. And we're like, okay, unified labeling all up, but it wasn't. It was unidirectional. It wasn't unified labeling. There was no bidirectionality there. You couldn't publish from this sensitivity labels back to AIP, right? It didn't work. So to Frank's question, what have they done with the interface, right? Remember in the old days when it was the Security and Compliance Center, right? It was a one roll-up, protection.microsoft.com. And then when GDPR came along, they thought, hey, this is a good time to split everything. And then they've done it again now. They've just prefixed all the things in the Compliance Center, right? And they call it now Microsoft Purview Compliance Portal. So when you go to compliance.microsoft.com, you're not going to see, it's not the Compliance Center, it's the Microsoft Purview Compliance Portal. Compliance Manager is, well, I think it's V2 or V3. Who's restarting their computer? Ed.
No, never mind. Sorry, I was messaging
Switch on and
Rod.
switch off, yeah. Okay. Well, if compliance doesn't work, restart your computer, right?
Right, exactly. If cloud doesn't work, restart your computer. That's exactly the first troubleshooting step. Yeah, keep going, Alistair, keep going.
So when we look at compliance, or we talk about compliance score, and we talk about, well, now it's got, what is that? Security posture score. They left the score part out. What we do when it comes to compliance, we lead with compliance. To bulletproof your security, we start with compliance, because if you follow the assessments in the Compliance Manager panel or tab in Compliance Manager, even before you get to all the other bits and pieces around data lifecycle management, which is also a new term that they've just created. It used to be information governance. Start with Compliance Manager, because that will tell you what you need to do, because it's improvement actions that you need to participate in. So if you need to be NIST compliant or SANS or ISO compliant, or all the other, there's a ton of them, FINRA, FedRAMP, HIPAA. There's no GXP because HIPAA and a few other things come through. But start there if you want to improve your security posture. Start with working through the assessment templates in the Compliance Manager tab before you even start looking at data classification and all the other bits and pieces. Now, what they didn't tell you is that Purview, the original one, V1, still exists, right? Azure Purview. I can't remember what they call it. Microsoft Purview something, right? It's still there, those three parts, the data catalog and the schematized data assets. And then they got that wrong as well, right? They said, oh no, sensitivity labeling, it's classification, it's not labeling, right? That's what I did my head in when I started looking at it. Oh, here's a Purview account, great. And what does it do? Oh no, it uses the classification schema for sensitivity labeling to identify objects that don't exist inside of your M365 tenant. Oh, I've got a AWS and I'd stick some other connectors in and now sniff a database and tell you that you are not GDPR compliant because you've got data subject information or personally identifiable information stored in a MySQL database hosted in AWS, right? Or GCP, pick one. So compliance is really about making sure that you're tying your strategic imperatives as a business from a governance, risk, and compliance perspective into IT. You know, it's no longer this 200-page governance doc that gets put into, because that's what we did, right? We wrote governance documentation. This is what you need to do around SharePoint and IRM policies inside of SharePoint and Office protectors. And we created that document and customers said, great, thank you very much for your time. They put it in a filing cabinet somewhere, and now they've got GRC, right? That was it. 10 years ago, that was it. But today, because of where content is stored, we don't know. I spoke to an insurance company. Well, no, I spoke about an insurance company last night at the monthly UG that actually had 300 WhatsApp groups. They created 300 WhatsApp groups to communicate, because they had not gone to the cloud. And this was the easiest way, because everyone in the organization had 8,000-9,000 users, 300 WhatsApp groups to communicate. And I was going, oh, that's a compliance nightmare. And funnily enough, one of the people, the comms manager, someone, actually, he was the guy on the call and he worked for the company that I was referencing. And he stayed on till the end, so he wasn't obviously annoyed by the fact that I kind of mentioned who they were in passing. I didn't mention their name, but I did joke about being able to discover all of these assets, right? It's in the name. But we lead with compliance. We've got an auditor that actually works for us. He used to be an auditor in a previous life, super bright kid. He does all the mappings across the data protection baseline. That's what you get as the freemium template. And it takes, I think, FedRAMP, NIST, and a few other controls that it's brought across from all the other assessment templates or the regulations and all legislations that you need to be compliant in. And he actually maps it back to licensing, right? So he will go and say, well, you've got a couple of thousand people inside of your organization, and you want some E5, some E3s and E1s, but you need to be NIST compliant. So you'll get that compliance with E5, but this is what you need to do at an E3 level to get your E3 users compliant, and what you need to do at an E1 level, if that means some scripting on the back end and all the other bits and pieces. So he's a genius. He actually built Compliance Manager in a spreadsheet as an auditor.
Is he a Microsoft person or a partner?
He's a partner. He works for our company. He's not a Microsoft person.
Okay, I could have swore I saw that a long time ago. It was IP, and you guys didn't want to share it. And I was like, this is slick, right? Being able to map it directly to the licensing, and he was able to make changes and say, okay, if you need to do this, you need this and that. I didn't know you guys were the creator of that. I hadn't seen it in a while.
Well, he's a young kid. He was an ISO 27001 auditor. He worked for the Deloitte or KPMG or something. And he used to audit mines, and he built a spreadsheet because that's what he needed to do, and that was his tool set. And then he interviewed at my previous company, and I showed him Compliance Manager, and he lost the will to live, right? Because Microsoft built it already. So what does he do now? What do I do now with my life? I said, come work with me. Yeah. And now we send him to do all the chain of custody and mutability stuff for everything that we do inside of our organization, not just it's in Compliance Manager. We're busy with a big Store Simple migration now, because Store Simple is no more, right? Matt's actually one of the architects on the project, and we bring in Rufaru, that's his name, into this, and he makes sure that there's a full immutability across the chain of custody for this migration, because GRC is saying, hey guys, we've got over 100 million voice recordings And we need to prove to the auditors that it hasn't been changed in any way, shape, or form. And this is just for file share stuff, right? So we're seeing that compliance is coming to the fore, not only in regulated industry, petrochemical, oil and gas, big pharma, but your insurance is actually now understanding that. And our biggest bugbear right now is, how do we talk to auditors about what the cloud is, right? So you need to be compliant. So if you look at ISO 27001, 2022, the new one that was just published, they talk about threat intelligence and a few other things that's been added to the legislation or the standard. Now, in the old days, when auditors would walk in, they'd literally go up to you. They've got a bunch of kids because they're all interns, and they send 15 of them, and they sit in your boardroom for 2 months, and then they give you instruction, right? And they'd physically come in and say, show me your backups. And used to walk to the tape library, grab the tape out and show, look, here's a backup, and it goes offsite. So we're good, right? You can't do that today. Where's your DR site? Is it 10 miles from your current data center?
Right.
Take me there, drive me there, show me. Okay, DR, done. And now you tell them, but it's over there. and it's like old man shouts at cloud. How does this work, right? Because that's the question. How do you prove that you have backup? Where is it? Show me the tape, please. So that's one of the problems we have. But first pass, go to compliance manager, look at the data protection baseline and just follow the steps, right? And then I got 99 problems, but MFA ain't one, right? It's easy.
There you go.
Yeah.
I find that the technology is stripping out the capability of these so-called auditors, right? And they're not keeping up, right? So they're coming in with antiquated mindsets. Now, I think more young people like Brody are coming in and they're able to do it, but you're right. I remember those days, and I was told when auditors come in, like, don't go technical. They'll ask too many questions. Give them yes, no, show, go, and get out of here, right?
Give them what they need just to pass. I got a question, Al, because I don't understand some of the capabilities. So you're talking about Compliance Manager, aka Microsoft Purview, but is that just in Microsoft 365 world, or does it cross over into Azure and other cloud platforms? Because in Azure we've got compliance, regulatory compliance in Defender for Cloud. So what's the difference?
Well, the regulatory compliance, it's based on the Azure Security Benchmark, right? And I think that's also loosely based on, there's some CIS stuff in there.
There's PCI, there's ISO, whatever template I think you want to map it to.
And what's cool about the Azure, so the regulatory compliance in Defender for Cloud, right? We can't call it the Azure Security Center anymore. I think that's all gone. That ship has sailed. It's based on the same. Well, you go look at compliance standards like ISO 27001. I'll keep referencing that. And it's the same sort of remediation actions, right? It's based on the same thing. And Compliance Manager will give you the assessment template and tell you, hey, you need to do this. So let's use something simple like 3389, close it on public endpoints, right? That's a remediation action. And as much as they split, and I was there when they split the security and compliance centers, right? I think we were doing MS500 originally, right? And at the beginning, they started splitting it, right? You have the security center and the compliance center, right? And they started rolling that out. And in the old days, you could still go to protection and it would take you to that weird portal, right?
Security and
everyone was confused. Yeah. So it
was a weird portal.
It was a weird portal, right?
It was really tough to find anything unless you knew the direct link. So
you had to go to more, and then it shows those blocks, right, with all the other centers. So it does connect and it does help you achieve these things when you start looking at regulatory compliance. So NIST, I'll use NIST as an example. NIST, you need PIM-PAM, Privileged Identity Management and Privileged Access Management. You can't implement NIST without it, right? Because you've got to get elevated privileges. You've got 4 hours to perform a specific task, and this is your role, right? That's NIST. Right, start there. Everything starts there, right, for NIST, and that's going to come through both in Compliance Manager. So if you are looking at the assessment templates, it's loosely based on what that regulatory compliance looks like, and I think it sits on the same back end. for that. So when you start talking all up compliance, right? Because it's not just Azure and M365, it's the glue like you have with Sentinel, right? The security benchmark, I'm actually just looking at it right now. I want to have a look at, it's the same thing. They look at the controls in exactly the same ways. And that's what they do. They take GDPR, there's a bunch of sections with controls that said you must and you have to. And they interpret that and then they map that back to the technical components. Now remember, it's a shared responsibility model, right? And any one of the network security one, right? It says establish network segmentation boundaries, right? That's a control that's stipulated under network security as part of, I don't know which one. This is the security benchmarks. Right? I think they get a lot of these controls from CIS. Right? Yeah. And then they'll talk about the compliance status, exactly the same sort of things that you get from Compliance Manager when you look at the assessment templates. That's about improving your compliance posture. There's that word again, compliance posture, right? And it's the same thing. So if you had to go and look at data protection baseline, and I'm just waiting for it to open. Come on. It's the same. So it's a roll up into both sides. It's not just clouds.
So is the compliance manager that you're talking about, it comes out of Mac or Microsoft Admin Center, admin.microsoft.com. So you would get to it through one of the admin portals. Okay. And does it give you a view into everything that's in your Office 365, Microsoft 365 tenant, as well as other things like Azure? Or is it just the Microsoft 365 stuff, your identity in Azure Active Directory, but
it integrates into both. So
SharePoint, Exchange.
If you look at msportals.io, it will give you a list of all the portals, right? Okay. Now, when you go into the assessment template, so you go and you say, I want to do a data protection baseline for Microsoft 365, right? And then you look at let's pick one, access control and procedures. It will actually, this is a standard, integrate on-premise, they got it wrong again. Frank, we need to go back to Microsoft and tell them how to use grammar. Integrate on-premise. It's on-premises identity platform with cloud access, a decision engine, right? That will actually launch into Microsoft Defender for identity. So it will actually pull up the blades that you need to, or the interfaces that you need to work with in order to implement what is this? This actually goes to cloud app security. Well, they're still talking, wow, they haven't fixed anything yet. Your organization can use Microsoft Cloud App Security. Again, this is wrong, right? It should be a Defender for Cloud Apps, not MCAS. I liked MCAS. It rolled off the tongue, and then the Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps.
It did roll off the tongue, yeah, but it's better than advanced threat protection stuff, right? That was kind of annoying.
Well, I want them to say Microsoft Defender for conditional access. Can they please can they do that? That's what I want. Defender for conditional access. It's great.
Yeah.
We want that. MDAC. That's just MDCA. So yes, it does.
MDAC.
I don't like
when they launched Entra. When they launched Entra a few weeks ago, then people were like, "Oh no, they're gonna rename Azure Active Directory like Defender for Identity, like something else, right? Defender for Active Directory or something." Yeah, right. There was that.
So how, Alistair, how can an incident response team security side use Compliance Center to investigate things that are going on internally?
Well, look. So I knew Frank was gonna hit me with one of these, right? The answer is what? from an alerts perspective, and it depends on what you glue into your environment. So if you're using Defender for Cloud apps, right, you'll get some stuff coming through around the alerts, because the alerts and the audit search is pretty much the same as in Defender. It looks pretty much as in security.microsoft.com. So from an incident response perspective, have a look at what the alerts are coming through, because there are multiple things that happen from a compliance perspective. Now, something as simple as insider risk, right? That's a security thing. Yeah, that's a security thing. I am disgruntled because I did not get an increase. So every day I work with five.
I'm disgruntled as fuck.
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me.
You just triggered the communication compliance,
Great.
Edward. You're in trouble.
Now I get to edit. Way to
No,
go.
don't edit it.
Demonetized.
Don't edit it.
Demonetized. The show is not demonetized. The show is brought to you by is you're no longer making any money.
Wait, we could have made money this whole time? Oh, man. Edward. Yeah. Keep going, Alistair. Yeah.
So think about insider risk, because when we start, and the fact that insider risk sits in as part of compliance is just weird, right? Now, when you start thinking of a disgruntled employee, they just went for a yearly review, and they're told they're not getting an increase, right? They scored a 3.7 out of a possible 5, and they don't qualify for increase. So when we start looking at what happens, all of a sudden this person's downloading 300 documents a day instead of downloading 3, right, in OneDrive, right? That is something that you need to monitor, because from an insider risk perspective, that should be an anomaly that's been detected, right? And you're going to get that through the compliance center, and that should form part of your incident response plan from a risk perspective. Then there's also around mass deleting and all of that, because that's insider risk. Also, when you start looking at incident response stuff, if you configure stuff for banks, right? Well, not necessarily banks, but sort of the East Coast, New York, just go walk down Wall Street, and there's a bunch of traders there, and they need the Chinese wall stuff, FINRA, right? And the fact that we now have information barriers in the compliance center, and it's no longer just partial. Those are the other things that you are wanting to look at when it comes to incident response, right? So,
what can content search provide you? What can it see?
Everything.
Yeah, it's powerful.
Pretty much. So when you look at, and it's the same sort of blade that you get inside of the audit search, right, with content search. So anything that gets logged as an activity inside of the M3, well, inside of your tenant, you can actually pick up on. So if you want to know how many files were deleted by a user over a period of time, you can do that. And actually the logs are not kept that long. So you'd really want to pull that into, you want to do some ingestion into Sentinel so that you can keep the logs longer. Then I think this one is up to a year, up to 10 years. If you add I think you can buy up to 10 years. But with a content search, now remember, you've got content search, audit, and then you've got e-discovery, and they're 3 different things, right? E-discovery is around case file management, right? So when it comes to litigation, then you actually want to run an e-discovery case. Content search gives you the same functionality, but it's not based on case, right? You can actually search for what this user did across Teams, SharePoint, and OneDrive over a period of time, and then you can. It's an audit trail when looking at things, right? Whereas audit trail, and I wouldn't say it's confusing, but a content search has got less auditability, not less auditability. You've got the same drop-down list when you're there. It's activity searching. I don't think Microsoft has quite figured out what to do with audit versus content search, right?
So I got a question for you. So this is a use case scenario. Let's say I'm developing, a new phone, a new Windows phone. I've got the plans in a Word document, right? I want to make sure that this document, if it somehow gets released into the wild, is encrypted and nobody can read it except for 5 users. How do I do that with inside compliance, or can I do that in compliance?
Well, let's talk through that, Frank. When we look at the compliance center, it's an all-up compliance. It's not just a assessment template, and that's why there's a problem in the name, right? Because when we look at compliance manager, that's one thing that just says at a business level, you can subscribe to some sort of regulation or legislation or standard, and you can now, when the auditors show up, you can be compliant in ISO 27001. But because they've called it compliance, it's governance, risk, and compliance. It's not just compliance.
Right.
Now, when we start talking about information governance and information protection, two things, right? And they now call it data lifecycle management for information governance, which is retention. How long do you keep something for? But we want to start talking about information protection in this case. So I work for Aspen Pharmaceuticals or Pfizer. Pick a big pharma, and I've got the next wonder drug, right? Male pattern baldness. You no longer go to a cow and lick your forehead. You actually pop a pill, and all of a sudden there's more follicles coming out of your forehead than anything else, right? But now we're literally creating the next thing. So think about Johnson & Johnson and everyone else that created the COVID stuff, right? It's no longer, that's the new wonder drug, right? And how they're going to pull this like they pull Joe Rogan stuff when we start talking about ivermectin and all these trials, right? So we're not going
to go. Another edit. Way to go.
But we're not going to. We're talking, I'm Pfizer, and male pattern baldness, we're going to solve it. They don't redistribute the follicles in the back of your neck to the front of your head like they've done with Elon Musk and who was that? Jimmy Carr, right? They had transplants done. So you create this wonder drug, and you are now communicate. Well, Jimmy Carr admitted it on air that's what he had done, right?
That's fair.
The king of one-liners. So we go and we say we want to protect information. And this is what a lot of people don't get, right? We think immutability is a PDF. We create a PDF, you can't edit and you can't do anything with it. But that's exactly
so true.
PDF/A, right?
Yeah.
It's non-editable, right? There's a checksum and boom, Ninja does.
No way to edit it after that. Nope.
No. Yeah. So when we start talking about information protection, the old information rights management, that's the important part. Now, Microsoft has had this thing called Office Protectors, and it will protect content. And you could do it with ADRMS. Same thing, nothing's changed, but this is really around locking down content. So you're working with, and this is where sensitivity labeling comes in, and this is where you're working with highly confidential information, and you want to lock down a Word document. People don't seem to understand that you can. You can put an information protection policy or a sensitivity label with information protection on a document that says, I can't forward this or attach it to as an email because it's got the ingredients, KFC, right? I don't know if anyone knows. Have you ever looked at the KFC Twitter account?
A little.
They follow 11 people, 5 herbs and 6 spices. True story. The 6 spices, that's the Spice Girls that they follow, right? And then they follow Herb Albert and Herb and 5 other herbs, right?
Oh my God, I didn't know that.
You got to check it. You got to check it.
Okay.
So think about KFC, right? They've got the special ingredients that they use. Now, to lock that down, you'd put an information protection policy onto it. And you'd say, you can't email it. Nobody can edit it. You can't forward it to anyone. If you receive it as an email, this is the group of editors and everyone else has got view rights, and you can't use the snipping tool. That works, right? That literally works. So part of being, and that's why I hate the word compliance, right? That's information protection. And stop saying that it's part, well, I suppose it's part of governance and risk, right? Not necessarily, you're not compliant in anything if you deploy an information protection policy, right? Well, it depends on the industry. I suppose a nuclear power regulator would be compliant according to NIST if they've got protection policies. But that's one of the ways that you can lock down content inside of your organization so that there's no data leaks. Right? Because that's a term that they use now. Well, data leaks, and then you start looking at, they worry about privacy management with Priva, and this is a great segue. They worry about privacy management and PII, all the rage, right? And then you go speak to the people on the West Coast in California that came up with these security things, right? And then you see New Yorkers jump the following month and go, hey, we like what they're doing. We also want it. And then we create one around what human resource companies are doing, or placement organizations are doing in New York. And now all of a sudden you need a cybersecurity policy. It was bizarre a couple of years ago when they started doing this, but part of that was to protect personally identifiable information, right? So any records that belong to a user, and it's not just around GDPR, although the GDPR just made it like current for everyone, right? I remember I did a OneDrive rollout at Activision. It was like, I can die now. I jumped on a plane, went to LA, walked into Activision, right? And I'm like, I want to see everything. I can't take any photos, but I was not allowed to take photos. I said, this is career highlight, right?
Right.
I'm rolling out OneDrive for Activision because they moved off simplicity, right? And what they used to do is when people left, they used to copy all their information onto a USB stick. That was part of the exit, right? Here's your information that you've stored. Literally, it's on a USB stick. You must remember, it says machine readable format. So we take your mails, we take files that's sitting in simplicity and whatever other personally identifiable information that you have inside of your organization, we give it back to you on a USB stick. They had a resource just do that. That's probably more now with everything that's going on in Activision, right, and Blizzard. But USB sticks walk it out through the door. Now, something that's just coming back to Frank's point, if you put an information protection policy and it's not that sexy anymore, it's not great because it's in the compliance end, it's been around since the beginning of time. You could do with ADRMS, there was an RMS tracker as well, so you could track what happens with this document, because what that does is it says, and Adobe had a thing called a policy server, which was magic, right? I don't know why Microsoft just didn't buy policy server, because it's similar to what happens when you put an information protection policy on a document. It says, hey, I can't edit this thing. Great. Even the snipping tool, it just blanks the screen out. And it works with Snagit for Camtasia and with GreenSpot as well. Any snipping tool where we want to grab the text. But what it does is it will say, well, go check to see if this policy is still relevant, right? If you've got offline access, you can set it, okay, they need to be online. If they've been offline for 7 days, it needs to go check and see if any changes have happened to that. So you can protect Microsoft documents and PDF now, and I think they mentioned it in the week. You'll be able to do it inside of Adobe now and add a sensitivity label from Adobe directly into a PDF. Very exciting. But you can either label it manually that way, or you can do it at a group level, right? You can say, well, I have a document library inside of SharePoint, and all confidential information needs to go in there, right? Now, there's automated ways of doing it in manual ways. Automated, you need an E5 manual, you can use an E3. And you can drop a document into a document library and it will automatically inherit from the sensitivity label that's assigned to that. And it's in development now. They're releasing, I think they're busy releasing it now, where when you create a document library, you can select the sensitivity label or the policy that you want applied to the entire, all content in the document library. Even if it's got an existing label, it will rewrite that. Now, you've had that for teams for some time now, where you could create a sensitivity label policy for the entire team. You've had it for SharePoint for the entire site, and now you're getting it at a document library level, where when you create the document library, you can select that. We're still not sure what's happening with the licensing, because they see it as auto labeling. You need an E5 for that, but that's the other thing that you can do. If your users are not interested in classifying and categorizing their content based on highly confidential, public, private, the four usual things that come straight out of the box for these things. You can use auto labeling, which means specific words. So think about sensitive information types, social security numbers, credit card numbers, and they've got over 200-300 types, right? If someone puts a social security number in a document and they are obviously connected to your environment, it will go and auto-classify that document with a label based on conditions equal true. So if there's this, there's a lot of false positives because in South Africa, we've got 13-digit ID numbers. And you might have someone that uses 13 digits in a document, and then it gets flagged as highly confidential because it's got personality.
You got to train it. You got to tend the garden. Yeah.
With MIP, which I assume is taking a look at this, do you still see a huge importance for deployment of the AIP scanner?
No.
Across repositories?
Well, that's the only thing that's still AIP, right? Is the scanner. So if you've got file share on-prem and you want to go sniff it, the AIP scanner is probably the last thing that's still left, right? Last of the Mohicans.
Yes.
And so and there's still, it's still kind of, you used to, if you use the M365 apps or Office from the tenant, right? That gets deployed. It says sensitivity in the little box at the top. If you're using the AIP label, the client, because you had an AIP client, right, it would say protection. And that's how you know. There are coexistence models for both, but you can still deploy it if you've got a traditional file share, and the AIP scanner will go sniff that. But I think now it actually talks to the sensitivity, your unified labels. It will look at the labels from the compliance center,
right,
and use that and not the labels that's sitting in AIP, because that functionality doesn't exist.
Right.
So
Matthew, you have a question, sir?
Yeah. Okay. So it's quite a basic question, right? So with sensitivity labels and policies, you can encrypt files, right?
Yes.
And I think that's what
protect files. You
protect
can
files,
encrypt, and that's another thing. People get confused. They say, "Well, we've got encryption, right? And we've got at rest and in transit we secure." Yeah, let's tick that box. Nobody's using Wireshark to sniff a packet, right? But this is not the FBI.
So, okay. So,
but you do encrypt it. You do encrypt it when you add
it does get
management.
encrypted. Right.
Yeah, it uses AES 256, right?
Well, you can encrypt it.
Yes. So your protection policy can say, okay, this can never leave the organization, or this can leave the organization, but only to these domains, or it can leave the organization but can never be printed, right? Those are policies, protection policies. But one of the protection actions, I understand, is that you can encrypt the file, right?
Yeah. Well,
now, if you encrypt an entire document library in SharePoint, does that mean that like co-authoring is broken? Because co-authoring doesn't work so well with encrypted files, right?
I know they're working on that, but yeah, that's been a pain point recently. Go ahead, Al.
Well, it's two things. Encryption and protection are two things, right? Encryption is not protection, right? And
no, but it's part of protection.
Well, yes and no. You don't have to encrypt the document, but you can protect it, right?
Yeah,
I suppose. But if the data leaves the organization and ends up on the dark web, the encryption is what's going to, I guess, delay the ability for a bad actor to be able to read that until they're able to break said encryption. So it is a protection element.
Well,
I can protect my kids at home, right? I can lock them inside the house and they're protected. But if somebody gets into the house, they're not protected anymore. So I can protect them further by putting them in a safe or a room that has a special key to get into, and only I have the key. And
social workers at your door, mate.
Yeah, hopefully there's breathe holes, but
protecting them, right?
We're following.
Or I can say, okay, my kids, you're protected because when you go out in public, don't talk to strangers. That's a level of protection, right?
Yeah.
It's not encrypting them. I'm not locking them in something when they go outside. I could, but then people would see what I do with my kids at home.
So think about Office message encryption, AME, right?
Yeah.
Well, Outlook message encryption.
Right.
AME.
Yes.
That's encryption. That's not protection. Now, if you can decrypt it, you get an encrypted message, right? We get this, right? And then they need to verify who you are. The typical sort of duck typing. I am Alistair. I walks like a duck. It talks like a duck. It looks like a duck. It's a duck, right? So when you look at Outlook message encryption, I'm encrypting communication, right? Data at rest and in transit, even if the document's attached. It's not protection, right? It's not protection. I can see it. If I download it, I can do whatever the hell I want with it. I can print it. I can forward it to people. The encryption's stripped because I'm decrypting it because I'm the actor that's allowed to interact with object.
Right.
You are, but others are not.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
If you try to forward it, the encryption.
Depends.
Okay.
It depends. If I download it and I do something offline with it, right? I've decrypted it. I've got access to it.
Yes, you're now an insider risk because you're mishandling appropriate data. Yes.
But if I protect the content, right? Because everyone goes, oh, I'm protected. I switch on encryption. That's fine. That just means you get this weird little icon that says it cannot be displayed in this window. You need to open up. It's not displayed in the display view of Outlook. You have to double click on it and then it opens and it says, hey, identify who you are. Okay, we know. Yeah. Great. Access control door opened. That door that opens.
If you have the identity. Yeah. If you have the identity of the person who's qualified to open that document based on the encryption policies, yes, you get in. But everybody else does not get in unless you have that identity.
Let me be the great arbitrator here. Right. Both Matthew and Al are correct because they're not mutually inclusive and they're not mutually exclusive of each other because you can have an encrypted file, but you didn't protect it.
Yeah. Yes.
Any encryption can be broken. We may not live long enough to see it broken on the computers that we have now. I don't know what we're going to do with neural-based quantum space-time continuum computers that we're building, right? And then you can protect a file, but if the protection fails, then the file is wide open. I think they're layered, right? Because you have to realize encryption hasn't always been around. And the old way of protecting the file was putting it inside of a file cabinet, and then you have some Marines out there with guns and stuff saying, aliens don't exist. I think they're enhancement to each other. Whereas you can protect the file, and then if you want to enhance the protection of it, you encrypt it. Because I don't think you can encrypt the file. Well, you can. Yeah, you can. It goes back to what I said. You can encrypt the file, but not protect the file. Because if I encrypt it, put it on USB, someone says, Brody, hey, I got this, stick it in. Now, the chances of them breaking the encryption, unless you're using
are improbable today, but when quantum comes out, it can be broken.
So what's an example of protection then the
example of protection is access to the file. You don't get access to it. I'm putting it in a safe repository so that is who you know, who you are, what you know, what you have, and what you can prove. Right? And so I can
got in a SharePoint site that's locked down, and you can't access that. But then somebody gets the file from the SharePoint site.
You do not have permission to view this file, whatever.
Yeah. So I would go back and say, I would ask someone if they say, "Well, Ed, you're wrong." I would say, "Well, isn't this protection? I put a file on a file server." Air gap it, disconnect it, put it in a safe, lock the safe up, and have the combination. Now, that stuff is not encrypted, but it's protected. Now, if I want to enhance that, the encryption probably comes around, not necessarily, to throw out external threats, but it's a layered measure of confidentiality and integrity of the file. There you go.
There's a couple of things, right? And with Outlook message encryption, that was where people went to. And when you start looking at information protection, encryption is there by default, right? They don't split it anymore like in the old days. In the old days, you could have an AIP that had nothing to do with encryption, and you could apply a label from IRM or rights management services that had nothing to do with encryption. It would protect the file. Today's world, Microsoft has glued that together where it will encrypt files and email, right? But you still got Outlook message encryption, which is separate to what you're doing with sensitivity labels.
Mm-hmm. And you have to have encryption because history has shown protections have failed.
Right, exactly.
People are not following the policies. S3 buckets all the time. Right. Just leave it S3 buckets unprotected. You're able to do is get a Shodan scan and go, there it is. Right.
Assume breach
failed.
Right.
Assume breach. And the encryption is to make up for the idiocies of humans. Like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna expose this web server to the internet, and I'm going to put my secrets in here. I'm going to put these files on here, right?
Or a well-funded persistent attacker. To be fair, it's not just idiots. It's also right. Somehow the layers of you're right. Somehow the defensive layers of protection have all failed, and now the file is out, right? And encryption is the last thing that's going to keep someone from opening it and reading the KFC recipe, to use Al's earlier analogy.
So if I understand, like, so I did a stint in DLP years ago. And so that was data leakage prevention or protection again. But so is that a form of protection where you say, okay, this Word document has got information that is the recipe, the 6 herbs and spices, all right? This must not go to our competitors. And so if an email with that document attached is sent by one of my employees to a domain that is with a competitor domain, stop that immediately, alert somebody, and have a little conversation with the employee, right? That's data leakage prevention. That's a protection mechanism to protect the document. But the document's not encrypted, right? But
it could be, but it doesn't have to be.
It could be.
Scenario,
it could be,
right?
exactly.
You could encrypt the document and the message. Go ahead. Yep.
Yeah. So now you have somebody who, an employee, maybe the DLP policy says, you're about to send this to, whatever competitor. Are you sure you want to do that? And they're like, yeah, of course I want to do that. And so they overwrite the protection policy because you're allowing it to be overwritten.
Right.
And then it gets out and it gets to the competitor, and the competitor goes, ooh, look at this. We have this document, right? And they try to open it up. If it's encrypted, then they go, what you going to do? I can't get into it because I don't have the key
for the identity.
Encrypted.
And the DLP is always based on a set of either pre-built or purpose-driven detections. I'll give you a DLP that happens all the time until within the last decade was always an issue. People were doing backups unencrypted. So that was a DLP event. If the auditors come in and had a hair up their butt, I'm like, yeah, you don't have it in a secure storage. I think Al made a comment at the beginning of the podcast. When the auditors came, he went and brought the tape to him. So the auditors be like, oh, let me take a look at this tape. And then he puts it in there and he opens it up, and then next thing you know, you fail audit because it wasn't encrypted. He was able to just read it, right? He'll go get ArcServe and restore it, right? Or Veritas and restore the darn thing. And now you got. Matter of fact, that's a true story. Saw it happen. And the company ended up having to use Iron Mountain after that.
We've had a bank, this was a couple of years ago, where they literally bought tubes of super glue and they walked up to notebooks, to laptops, and they glued the USB ports.
That is rumored to have happened at the Iran nuclear facility after that malware incident, because it was allegedly a USB stick in a parking lot that was brought in, and they super glued all of the USB ports. Yes, and now there's technology to just disable that or to scan said USB sticks for sensitive information. But that's a very hammer and nail approach to security there for sure.
Well, it's a non-IT thing, right?
Solution,
Give it to make it someone else's problem, right?
I give you a funny. I'm trying to find the image. I saw it on the internet. It was an Ethernet cable that went into a switch, and written on the Ethernet cable said to activate firewall, cut here.
Yeah. We've seen like a half-height rack where it says, in case of breach, break glass, right? And unplug it. I've been hacked years ago. And the only reason why I knew, I'm talking about the early 2000, it was actually 2000, right? And we blamed the Linux people upstairs, right? Because they had a couple of servers in my server room, and we had a fancy server room where you'd walk in and patch management was done, color coding, and it was very pretty. It was, you walked into the building and then there was the server room, right? And I was standing in front of the console, and Norton was running, right? and it was scanning directories. And I literally saw it went /f, it wasn't fserv, that's IRC stuff. But it went _pub / published by / whatever the courier group was, like class 1911 / Ghost Recon, right? And if I didn't see the scan happen, I didn't know that one of these guys' servers were hacked. It was an unsecured server. They got in on 23. They published a FTP, and everyone was downloading Ghost Recon from one of the servers. And I literally went to the back of the PC, the server, and I pulled the network cable out, you know? And that's how we manage security breaches. You pull the network cable out.
Right.
That doesn't happen, right? Today you can't. And this is the fear of people moving to the cloud, is that the old guy, right, that's nearing retirement, and I used to talk about a 47-year-old male, right? I'm 47 now, so I've had to change the number, right?
You're the graybeard now. Yeah.
I'm the gray.
So, Alistair, so we're going to ask Andre on at some point. What should he talk about? And you'll have to come back and
please let me come back.
Please come back. Yeah.
Identity. Ask him to talk about identity. I think that's you the security guy. Get him to talk about identity and what he's had to do in banks in South Africa when it comes to identity management.
See, what's interesting.
South Africa, are you in? Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm in Cape Town. Andre's in Johannesburg. We by the ocean.
I love it. I've been to both places, coming back, and then we went to Durban too. Wait,
okay, well,
sure. When I come back, I will look you up. Yeah.
Please, please.
I'm only allowed to invite guests on the show when somebody doesn't show up for the week. So that's how we gave you short notice here. So hopefully now I'll put pressure on the rest of the on the Microsoft people to invite Andre in. So all right. So I think Brody's got one final question for you.
Sure. Thank you. Well, first off, Al, your experience is very clear. You've been working on all these solutions for a long time. You know acronyms and product names that I didn't even know existed on the earliest iterations of these things. So I've just been in this space for close to 2 years now since I joined Microsoft. And I have yet to work with a customer who has activated, enabled, fully deployed the whole of the quote unquote compliance / purview / whatever center you want to call it. And it's bits and pieces, and we're getting there. Have you worked with someone or a customer who has all up, taken advantage of everything? Maybe not necessarily Priva because it's not involved in E5, but maybe at least everything that's under the E5 umbrella. And can you just talk about what that looks like in the end game and having everything talk to one another and having that visibility across the board? I just haven't seen it yet in my experiences. I'd love to hear from you.
I'm trying to think now. Highly regulated industry would have this. So nuclear power regulators, I'll always talk to them because they have to be NIST compliant, right? So if you go speak to a good friend of mine, well, I've known her for years, and she actually pinged me on LinkedIn the other day because they were talking about me at a conference or something, and they would have deployed all of this, right? And it's fit for purpose, really. That's the only sort of example. Anyone that needs to be NIST compliant, that industry vertical, not even GXP worries about these things, right? And that's healthcare, So maybe Northwell Health might have deployed this. I know when I dealt with them years ago. Banks, and the inherent problem here is not have we deployed everything in the compliance portal, right? Is how many other products do we have that does this? So Titus, SailPoint, what is the other one?
There's a million of them. Yeah, I'm working with a bank.
So Content Locker, Airlock, all the other bits and pieces, the McAfee DLP stuff. What was that other one? Proofpoint, right?
Right.
That do similar things. And our biggest...
But they're on islands. They're on islands and they're point solutions, right? Yeah.
So, in all of the Microsoft slides, when they get to the end after thank you, right, there's always that value calculation, right? That says it's $36 if you go and buy these products individually, and it's $12 for the E5 compliance add-on, right? I'm trying to think of in South Africa. No, the answer is no. And the reason why I say no is because there's very few companies, if they're not a hedge fund or they're a bank with securities, they will never use information barriers, right? If you're not FINRA, information barriers doesn't matter. It literally doesn't matter, right? So they'll never use everything inside of compliance, the compliance portal. And then also Priva's new. So if we took Priva out and we looked at, and then also inside of risk, retention, sensitivity, definitely. Compliance manager type stuff, yes. E-discovery is there by default because if you're going to do any sort of custodian stuff or e-discovery case and then content search. But what's new, communication compliance, they don't have a policy around communication, and then also information barriers. Those are the two things that I've not seen customers use. All the other bits and pieces, yes, but inside of risk, information barriers, that's FINRA only. So all of Broad Street in New York, right?
Right.
Those companies would use that specifically. They don't care about the other things. They only care about and the fact that it's now not just PowerShell is great. Although the permutations for one to many and many to one, and Matt's been down this road with one of our other guys at the office. It's still not there yet, but it's good enough, right? What it did, and the fact that they've ripped it out of Exchange is magic. Now it actually works, right? Because,
good.
Yeah,
so like ultra quick follow up is you've listed there's a bajillion different solutions, right? Island point solutions. Do you actually in the end, like, can you say definitive or not definitively, but your experiences with customers that once they're able to amalgamate a portion of what they currently have that maybe doesn't natively talk to one another into this all-encompassing stack, that there's benefits not only from cost but from usability and visibility?
Yeah, 100% to that, right? And we have the same conversation with customers around security, right? So McAfee, Mimecast, and Symantec, you can rip and replace, right? On the security side, you get the feature parities there. We've got customers that are running Netscope, and we say, well, rip and replace MCAS or Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps, same. When we start customers on their compliant journey, and to Frank's point earlier on when he said, well, what do? You know, all roads start with compliance manager, right? You need to be compliant in something. There's no point in creating retention policies if you don't have to keep things, right?
Right.
There's no legislation. If legislation said keep invoices for 5 years, great. But start with regulation or legislation. You want to be ISO compliant, or you want to be NIST compliant, or FedRAMP, or FINRA, or HIPAA, start there, and they will tell you what you need to do, right? It's that simple. People don't get it. They still hire consultants like myself and Matt to come tell them what to click, right? Because they can do it themselves, right? So follow what the assessment template that you need to be compliant in, and that then you can switch these things on, because sensitivity and retention, rolling that out inside of an organization that is not mature enough to understand what the technology does, nobody cares. Shadow IT again, and then you're sharing a document in a WhatsApp group. But start with compliance manager. Start there, right? It's easy read. It's something that you can read. So definitely go there. And then sensitivity and retention first, because it's now rolled up into DLP, and IT understands DLP, right? They don't understand records management. So now you're using information governance, data lifecycle management. That's what it's called, right? I know data leakage.
It is now. I didn't actually know that name changed until you mentioned that. I'm like, oh yeah, they did change that. That must have been recently. Yeah.
So it's not, nobody talks retention. We talk about data lifecycle management, right? And now because that's part of DLP, it now becomes a thing. So you're actually using retention schedules, retention and disposition as part of your thing. Although static scope policies is a problem, especially for mailbox retention, because there's a limit, right? So there's static and adaptive, right? And customers that are on E3s that they don't want to spend the extra $12. I've got a customer in Istanbul right now, 12,000 users. They're in the UK and the rest of Europe, right? So that's 2 retention labels or retention policies that they need to apply to Exchange, right? Keep this mailbox for 2 years and keep that mailbox for 5 years. Now, with adaptive scope policies, you can say if country or location equals UK, apply 2, and if country, apply 5, right? And that works with adaptive scopes. Static scopes, you're limited to 1,000 mailboxes per policy. They've got 12,000 mailboxes. So what we need to do is we need to build a logic app to run. I think it's like 24 different policies, retention policies, to do a lookup into Azure AD, check the location, have a corresponding backend database to check if this policy has changed. So on first load, it's once off, and then it's, if someone moves from the UK to the rest of Europe, change the policy. But because it's the upsell and they don't want to spend 12 times.
That's hilarious. So they built the logic app to get around the need to upsell to the E5 compliance.
We're going to be building the logic app to do this with approvals, right? So that someone can say, okay, this person's moved from the UK to, what's a logic and a function app to do this. When they move from the UK to the rest of Europe, it's now no longer 2 year, it's a 5 year, right?
Germany or Poland, someplace has a completely different set of standards. Yeah, for sure.
Because they don't want to spend the 12 times 12,000.
It's hilarious, actually. Yeah,
it's cheaper. It's much cheaper, right?
I don't know. What maybe to maintain it over time. I don't know. Maybe we'll find out.
We build the logic. We build the adaptive scope stuff into the logic app.
Yeah, that's funny. That's a funny story. Thank you for sharing that.
All right, we are running up against time here. So, any final questions? I think we're good. Thank you, Alistair. Thank you, Matt.
Oh, by the way, Frank, we need to get like an ending audio thing for our podcast.